This is Born Strategist, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about why style matters. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar with what I mean by style, I mean basically the aesthetic look of a particular game, its theme. Okay, now what I mean by that is something like steampunk or futuristic combat, like you would see in something like, Mass Effect or Halo. So when you understand all these different types of genres and themes that are associated with those particular games, you start to understand that certain looks do kind of appeal to more people more so than another look. So I'll give you an example. Let's take a look at Warframe, which is a game I've been recently playing. Now, after playing through a good portion of the game, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, I'm really liking Warframe. And if you're a person that likes something like Destiny, mixed with Mass Effect style combat, but with like a lot of new mechanics, like the ability to flip and slide and do all that stuff, then you're gonna love this game. And it's very fun to play, it's very enjoyable, and it's very entertaining, and it's just very fun to shoot a bunch of slimy shit inside the PvE game modes. It's very fun, and I don't find a lot of PvE game modes all that particularly interesting to play, meaning because the mechanics don't feel good, the sound effects aren't great, the movement is foul. It's just you have to hit a lot of things on the head, and that's something that Warframe does. It's the best third-person shooting mechanics I've ever played, and I've played a lot of games like Gears of War, Mass Effect 3 had great mechanics too, and this blows them away. I mean, there are just a lot of things that Warframe has done exceptionally well, and its mechanics by far is probably one of the best things that's done. And aside from that, though, when you look at the aesthetic, the look of the game, its biological style of Warframes, it's not all that appealing to a great deal of people simply because it's just not all that interesting to a lot of people. Basically, some people find the look a little disgusting or, not interesting or just they don't particularly care for it in general. It's not visually, aesthetically speaking, all that appealing. And for that very reason, they'll probably gravitate towards something like, Destiny, which may have an aesthetic that they actually like, or maybe Call of Duty Infinite Warfare or Call of Duty Black Ops 3, to which, they probably prefer the look of that more so than they do than, something biological, alien, very kind of like slimy and rounded and disgusting looking. And when you look at a lot of the Warframes in Warframe, you'll notice that a lot of them basically just look very organic, very alien, and that's not something that a lot of people like. It's not a very appealing aesthetic, and for that very reason, a lot of people kind of just deviate away from it and they go for something more mechanical, more edgy, more sharp, more masculine. And that's something that Warframe isn't necessarily known for, although they have kind of like big, hulking, bulky, kind of edgy characters, but there's not very many of them. As a matter of fact, it's probably more, like really smooth and feminine and rounded and just kind of like, shiny and a little slimy looking and, very awkward looking forms because these aren't necessarily humans. You can tell that just by looking at some of their legs, for example. They're more alien in nature, and that's something that a lot of people aren't really accustomed to, considering that they normally fight against those types of creatures. And for that very reason, it's not all that appealing. It's very foreign to them, and they just don't particularly care for it. And I'll be honest, I'm not particularly fond of the Warframe's look, in Warframe. So for that very reason, I would prefer something along the lines of maybe, like Call of Duty Black Ops 3, just in terms of like aesthetics, or maybe like, Mass Effect. I think Mass Effect really hit it on the head for me when it comes to like its armor and its look, especially like, the default armor that you have in Mass Effect 3, because that was very practical and it makes sense and you believe it could exist in the real world. And I'm always in favor of practicality and realism, and that's something that was done very well. Or even the Batman suit from the Dark Knight Rises or the Dark Knight. That was also very practical and realistic, and it looked cool. So reality is cool, people. I'm telling you, there's a lot of cool things in reality. You don't have to go too far into the future to see something cool. But with that said, I just want to go ahead and let you guys know that style does matter. Whether you acknowledge it or not, whether you see it or not, it does. It could be something as simple as saying, hey, that person is attractive, that person isn't, or what you're interested in general. It doesn't have to be physical looks. It could be just the way something feels, or the way something sounds, and maybe you'll find that appealing. But what's your thoughts? What's your opinions? Let me know below. Until next time, thanks for watching. For more objective reviews, strategy guides, commentaries, and more, stay tuned to this channel.